guess, be fruitful and restore that amount to God, or as we go through this talk, to ourselves and to others. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Now, I understand, it's Lent. We're in the 4th week of Lent, and we hear about fasting often. We hear about it to no end. But I hope that we can use this idea of restoring fourfold as a jumping off point for renewed perspectives on what we can do during fasting, not why we fast. I would be treating it as a given that we know why we fast, but there are ways that we can improve and enhance the aspects of our lives that we can involve within the fasting so that it is a complete involvement mind, body, and soul in the process. And in the spirit of fourfolds, I have 4 points. The first one, it's really a question of what we're restoring. Do we all know, and we kind of know the basic beats of the story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus knows that Jesus is coming through Jericho. He climbs up a sycamore tree to try and see him because he's a short man. And Jesus calls up to Zacchaeus and says, "Zacchaeus, come down. Today I'm going to be at your house." And so, I guess, moved by that was Zacchaeus that he said, "Lord, half my possessions I give to the poor, and if there's anybody that I stole from, I restore fourfold." As in, I restore 4 times what I stole from them. And it's a large sum of money, especially given how Zacchaeus, as a chief tax collector, he probably getting a lot of money in from people that, like subcontractors basically, who would be collecting taxes on his behalf. And he, by extension, would have been stealing from them. But where does Zacchaeus get this concept of fourfold? Does anybody know? It actually comes from the Jewish law. It comes from the book of Exodus. So maybe if we can all open our Bibles to Exodus chapter 22. I'll give you guys a second to do that. And if somebody gets it, do you mind reading out verses 1 to 3?
If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If the thief is found breaking in and he is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. If the sun has risen on him, there shall be guilt for his bloodshed. He shall make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft.
Thank you. So 2 things there. One, the law that Zacchaeus would have known while being a Jew sets out a scheme for how somebody should pay back if they have stolen or taken something wrongfully from someone. The second thing is, it calls this process restitution. What does restitution mean, though? And restitution doesn't just mean giving back. That's returning. Restitution also accounts as compensation for loss or injury done. So what really the law is asking is that if you take something from someone wrongfully, not only do you restore to them what was wrongfully taken, but you give them back what would be worth the time that they're hard done by. The reason being that you need to be able to show contrition and as well as a commitment to justice. I say you, I mean we and everyone. And if we apply this concept to fasting, though, am I stealing anything from anyone by not fasting? Okay. Let's just say that... Are you? I'm asking. To me, let's just say that we are stealing. Because there's actually 3 ways that I'm stealing by not fasting. I'm stealing from myself because I take away from myself the blessings and the virtue that come with it. Jesus, when he talks about the virtues of fasting, says that fasting and prayer are the things that cast out demons. They are the things that help us grow our relationship with God. So why I'm doing myself actively a disservice or stealing from myself those opportunities by not fasting. Not only this, I'm also kind of stealing from others in a way. How? Because there's power in collective fasting. You guys would probably be very familiar with Abuna at the beginning of every fast telling us, guys, please make sure you're fasting. There is power in us fasting together. And there really is. A commonly quoted example is the moving of the mountain Ma'atam, where a mountain in Egypt was moved by 3 days of fasting and prayer by the people. And that level of faith only came, or that level of faith and that ability to move the heart of God only came by everybody fasting together. So why would we rob others of that kind of power that comes with fasting and prayer by not fasting ourselves? And finally, we're kind of also stealing from God. You know, it's in the Bible that we should fast. And while, yes, God is the rightful owner of all things, and he doesn't need anything from us, and he benefits nothing from our fasting, by not fasting, by removing ourselves from him, we are trying to remove ourselves from his hand, which is just not something that is our right at all. So then, we have 3 people that we're stealing from by not fasting. We have 3 people that we need to make restitution to if we're not fasting in our fast. But if we don't, what happens? It was in the book of Exodus, the verse that we read. In verse 3 it says, he should make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. And surely enough, if we don't make restitution to ourselves, to others, and to God in our fasting, then we simply can lose the virtue of self-control and are sold into slavery, into sin. Because I failed to put a bridle on the body. So how do I make restitution? I restore fourfold to everybody that I've wronged, to myself, to others, and to God. And we can do this in 3 big umbrella headings or conceptual things, fasting from 3 different things. So my second point, or the second fold, is in fasting from sin. Sin is the initial crime that I inflicted on myself, others, and God, and so therefore it is the first and the most important thing that I must abstain from. And it's not only fasting from sin, I have to replace it with something else. So when I'm making restitution to myself, I abstain from the sins that harm me. I abstain from gluttony, which is the food. I instead replace it with the virtue of self-control and controlling what I eat based on amounts and in types. I abstain from lust. I abstain from wrath. And that leads on to how I make restitution to others. In abstaining from wrath, replacing wrath and idle words and those kind of things with positive things, and replacing them with kindness, with long-suffering. All of that helps me to make restitution to others. And it's a part of true fasting that we also give up some of our time to others. And in making restitution to God, well, all our sin is separation from God. So by fasting from sin, I am returning what I stole from God, which is trying to escape from his hand or from his protection. My third point is talking about fasting from excuses. And this is where a lot of our fasting can be personalized, because everybody has their own excuse. I have my own excuses. We say things like, 55 days is too long. They added a preparation week, and they added the 3 days for the moving of the mountain Ma'at, and they added 7 days for Passion Week. It's all too much. Jesus fasted 40 days. I should just fast 40 days. Or, it's just a small treat. It won't hurt. I'll start fasting again from tomorrow. And it's not just in food. I'm too tired to pray or read my Bible today. Work was difficult. I'll catch up tomorrow. And these are all excuses that I've made. But as we saw in as was in the pre-talk today, we do need a transformation, because that's part of what fasting is a transformation. And restitution is a commitment, a transformation to return what was sold and to have some justice. St. Paul also says in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 26 to 27, he says, "Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." And that's kind of one thing that when we put in front of us when we're fasting, we can kind of start to avoid the excuses. Because if fasting is just about food, or fasting is just about the action, or doing what we're told, well then it's much less, I guess, powerful or as much of an incentive as having the goal in front of you that, no, this is a step towards God, this is a step towards my eternal life. And making excuses sort of defeats the entire point, or not the entire point, but one of the main benefits we get from fasting, which is self-discipline. The idea of fasting isn't that it's meant to be easy or it's meant to be nice. It's that by subduing the body, we elevate the soul. So, in making restitution to myself, others, and to God, how do I avoid these excuses? Well, for myself, it's being strict, and trying to have that goal in my mind and saying, even when nobody's looking, having that integrity to say, no, I'm fasting, this is what I'm going to put everything else aside. All that food that's in the fridge that was remaining from, the week before Siyam or the Rifah, we freeze it or throw it away. Or even in terms of prayer, or in terms of reading the Bible, planning it for the beginning of the day, practical things that are personal, and things that are, practical for you, but things that you can also discuss with your confession father, because I understand that sometimes not everybody is able to take on all the dietary aspects of fasting. When making restitution to others, I'm ensure that I am not a stumbling block for others, so that when I'm with my friends, it's that we're all fasting together. That's the implication. When I'm with my colleagues at work, I don't make exceptions. I say, look, this is how it is, and I'm vegan for this period of time. It's a religious thing. Deal with it. Most workplaces are happy with that. And in making restitution to God, well, God searches us. He searches our inner depths. He knows our intentions. So when we make excuses, that actively is a detriment to our relationship with Him. God understands if there is genuinely something that happened that was unexpected. But most of the time, things are expected. And we just are too easy on ourselves. And the fourth point is fasting from earthly attachments. This is something that I think we see the best in the lives of the saints. They show us exactly how heaven can become a physical reality on earth. We hear about the stories of the anchorites that go out into the desert. They spend years on their own with complete reliance on God taking care of them. Both food, money, company, doesn't matter. It's that same reliance that Jesus explained to the disciples who carry neither money bag nor sandals. God will take care of everything. So they do away with all these earthly attachments. Think about all the things we have. We have our physical things, materials, our phones, our screens, the things that occupy our attention and keep us away from actually developing our relationship with God. Even things that are not necessarily evil, or things that are not necessarily a sin, but things that we can sometimes overcommit to. Things like work. Maybe I don't need to take that extra overtime shift. Or things like money. Maybe I don't need to save all that money. Maybe I can give a bit extra rather than the 10% that's required by church. And I want to make it clear that it's not just the anchorites that are the only ones that are really giving up their earthly attachments. There's the story of St. Macarius the Great, a monk that lived during the olden times. He looked up and said at some point, surely there's nobody else left. Surely there's nobody else left that's good on this earth. Because he looked at the state of the world and he thought, it's curtains, it's over. But then God guided him and he told him, go to this city, ask for these two women that are living together. And he went and saw the way they lived. These two women were sisters-in-law. Their husbands were brothers, and while their husbands worked, they had essentially communion in everything. They took care of each other's children. They only kept as much money as they needed for their daily bread, literally, like what they would buy that day. Everything else they gave up. They gave up all the other money, the rest of their money to the poor. They gave up they gave society. They gave up their work. Everything else was spent on glorifying God. And it's a practical example for us. We are all lay people, and we all have something that sometimes is important to us. And it's something that we can give up to God. So, for example, in making restitution to myself, giving up things that I'm attached to. My phone, my screen, Netflix, video games, whatever it is. In others, avoiding idle talk, partaking in spiritual activities together, because we can all carry each other in fasting. And not just others that we know, but others that we might not know, in almsgiving and charity, when we give up money, when we give up even time, or our effort, or our knowledge, or our experience. All of that forms part of what God and others deserves. And finally, when making restitution to God, we do away with all the earthly distractions. We do our prayer, we do our Bible readings, we do our quiet time. Because in the end, that's what all the saints did. That's how they gave up their earthly attachments, by dedicating more of their time to God. Because when you take something away, you have to replace it. And by taking away all of those earthly attachments, they replaced them with the heavenly attachments, and they were able to experience the blessing and the joy that comes with having a heavenly experience on earth. So, in summary, when we fast, we are making restitution, or we are trying to make good not crime, but what we steal from ourselves in missing out on the blessing and the virtue of fasting, what we steal from others in taking away from the power of the collective fasting, and what we steal from God in contravening his commandment and trying to leave his safety and his protection. The ways that we can make good on that, the ways that we can do more in our fasting, is think about how we can fast from sin. We can fast from the excuses that we make daily, and to fast from the earthly attachments that keep us tethered. And yeah, that's kind of that. Any questions? Yes.
How much liberty do you think we should take in deciding how we fast, and thinking of ideas for how we set our limits?
How do you mean?
Like, an example is like for Lent, it's like usually a vegan fast. But do we have the right, or how much do we have the right to like try to modulate it and have different limitations? Maybe you have a big vice in your life that you always do, like watching TV, like that's a ritual that you do after coming back from work. Like you cancelled that, but then kept the dietary things.
it's a controversial statement. I will say that when it comes to that, the church sets out a minimum standard. Everything else should come in addition. And the church fathers kind of comment and say, you do as much as your health allows. I don't mean to set out a blanket rule and say, if you try to give up some vice you do during Lent, rather than fasting from diet, you're doing it wrong. But what I will say is that it's not a decision you can take alone. If it's about what liberty I have to make choices on my own fasting, I technically have no liberty. It's the spiritual plan that I set out with my confession father that's going to set out the rules that I have for my fasting. But if that's not been pre-discussed, then I am not at liberty to change anything. I should be doing everything else in addition. Does that kind of help or answer? Yeah.
Can I add?
Yes.
I think also with fasting, it's meant to be a sacrifice, right? And so a sacrifice can't be that easy, like, because it's a sacrifice. So if you use your liberty, you have to use it in honesty, right? It still has to be difficult to a degree for it to be a true sacrifice. And so, you know, obviously with your confession father or whatever, but the point is that we can't make it easy for ourselves because it's not a true fast, it's not a true sacrifice. And speaking from a perspective of someone who does have dietary issues, when I was trying to find my feet at the beginning, I was at a loss. I lost, you know what I mean? And I realized that I had to really make it harder and harder for me to actually get any benefit, because there was no change. I couldn't see a change other than spiritually. You know, you add spiritual activities and stuff, but I kind of felt like what Andrew's saying about, you know, I felt ripped off. You know what I mean? And then I was obviously ripping my church off because I wasn't in complete unity. So it's a fine line.
And then those next few weeks, we will likely have a meeting.